This is the Politics of Everything, and I'm your host, Amber Daines. Welcome to the podcast where we want to discuss the politics of everything, from money to motherhood, nutrition to narcissism, startups to secularism, the environment to equality, and much more. Our guests are experts in their field or topic of choice, even if you've not yet heard their name. This is a bipartisan podcast, so while we love exploring varied views and get a buzz from a healthy debate, by no means is this a one-sided forum for any one political view. So please listen up and enjoy the politics of everything. Before we get stuck into this week's episode, I'd like to invite you to help me. My podcast, The Politics of Everything, has been going since May 2017, and I've taken the plunge to enter, for the very first time, the Australian Podcast Awards. I need your help to try and get the popular vote. I actually need a thumbs up from you on their website. So I'll include a URL in the show notes, but please jump online, australianpodcast.com/categories, and there's a vote button. You then have to scan through to find the Politics of Everything with Amber Daines and hit like. You will have to register your details just so they know that you are a legitimate person, but I really appreciate your time. Now, let's get on with the show. Gender is something that defines us from the very second we're conceived. The doctors declare us a boy or a girl once we enter this world, and for most people it remains that way from birth to death. It also creates a lifetime of complexity in how we're spoken to, what perceived societal value we have, how much money we're likely to earn, and even whether we can get an education. This podcast explores the politics of gender, and my guest today is Bec Brideson, who for over 2 decades has been a pioneer and innovator in that marketing to women space. She helps other business owners and executives get a piece of the $28 trillion global female consumer market. From CEOs to sales departments, Bec is working along the pipeline to help businesses uncover the blind spots and financial upsides in the female economy and exploring gender diversity. Having spoken at many conferences throughout the world, Bec's raison d'etre is to improve the way modern business connects with the disruptive force of the female dollar. I love it. Welcome to the program, Bec.
Hi, Amber. Great to be here.
So this is obviously a very big topic, and I'd love to just, if you can recall back to being a young girl, did you ever have a sense that being female was different? It was a big deal. Like, were roles very gendered in your household sort of or society that you remember? Give us a little picture of your early childhood.
Okay. So I went to 9 schools. So, 9 different schools in 12 years made me the perennial new kid and the outsider. And it wasn't really gender that I noticed until around the early 80s. And as a grade 5 schoolgirl, I started yet another school. And I was one of the first students to go into a school that had traditionally been a 125-year male history boys-only school, and they made it co-ed. So I started to notice it a lot at that stage. I noticed that aside from the uniforms, it still seemed to largely be a curriculum that maybe was more suited to boys than girls. Everything from the sports reports, all of the old boards on the assembly hall that had boys' names, a lot of focus around cricket and football, and not a lot of opportunity for girls to be seen as really successful in competing in international sports, and that kind of really obvious patriarchy existed. And then when I look back and I think, the Bible, it's full of male characters, and our school books, our curriculum was very largely male driven. I studied art for years, and we always studied male artists. So in retrospect, I can see that it really just was the status quo.
Absolutely. And I do wonder sometimes how far we've come when it comes to that education piece. Interestingly, I'm sure that your early career also had some gender divides, if you like. And I know for myself, I worked in a male newsroom in my early 20s, post-university, pretty much was the only female business journalist on the floor at that time. and it did impact me. So do you have a career moment where you thought, wow, this is really going to be hard, or this is going to be challenging?
Well, the moment I decided I wanted to be in advertising was when I watched Bewitched. And I really loved the job that Darren had. But even when I think about the TV diet that I had back then, it was I Dream of Jeannie, it was Bewitched, and there you go. There's two magical goddess women who kept the home in place while the men went out to work. One was an astronaut and Darren had a job in advertising. But that was when I really had that moment. I want to work in advertising. I want to come up with ideas that help people sell things. So when I got into the industry, I didn't see it necessarily overtly to begin with, and certainly not as much as I see it now in hindsight. But my first 6 months as a junior, as an unpaid intern, there was some massive harassment that you just had to suck up because you were suck it up because you were lucky to be in there. That was the idea. Is if this is a competitive industry, and if you're in, then you just take what's put out there if you want to stay in the industry. And I guess as I got older, as I got into my first full-time role, there were comments. There were, wear short skirts, flirt with our clients. There was an assumption, probably a decade into my career, that if you're in the boardroom, you're possibly the EA. And I think people just weren't used to seeing women in the boardroom unless they were in those roles where you were support rather than C-suite. And, that really made me wonder about, what is it that they think that women add? What sort of value are they adding? And I felt that there were a lot of times where perhaps, the assumption was I was fair game. And what did that say about my brain? What did that say about what I had to offer? What was the value that I was bringing? And it certainly seemed that women did not bring the value that my male counterparts did, and I was very often the only female in the creative departments. And then as I got older and more senior, this sort of behaviour became more covert, and it's sort of insidious, and there was a lot of manipulation, I guess, around the entitlement of the men. And in the end, I was one of 3% of women in advertising to reach the role of creative director, and
which is a huge achievement. And I do want to stop you there because you've been in the industry a long time, and I guess then that's a bit of a novelty to have reached that really senior role as a female in a male-dominated world. I always picture Mad Men when I think of advertising, and I've had enough experience with advertising agencies to know the hierarchies that you're talking about. You've also won numerous international awards, and you have been recognised for your work, which I think is the key point here, that it's your work that's speaking volumes. And I guess, did you ever feel like you had to pedal harder because of those, whether overt or not, biases in the industry?
Yes, and I do think I learned, a lot of my mentors and the people that I learned my craft from were males. There were no females in the role that I wanted, and so I had to naturally look to the way the males behaved and what was acceptable and how did they think. And so I learned to look through a male lens, and I learned how to think like them and act like them and speak like them to a degree. I'm not saying that I totally lost myself, but I was aware that I was losing myself as I got older, and that there were no women, and that if there were women, they as soon as they had children, they left the workforce and they weren't welcomed back. So it was definitely a case of me, I sort of joke that I'm a recovering misogynist, because I even would write advertising concepts that had the usual cliches of woman at home, or woman as objectified, and man as the hero in the work that I was producing. And that was the way to get my work seen and through the clients. And anytime I tried to put women into those powerful positions, they'd say, "No, that doesn't work. That's not the way that's not the way we work. That's not the way we sell our products." And that's when I started to see there was a problem with gender and the way we were perpetuating old gender stereotypes.
Interestingly, you found an opportunity in that, though, and I know on the back of this wealth of experience you had in advertising, you identified a gap in agency attitudes and processes within this so-called female market. And I know that when you started your agency, Venus Comms, in 2004, things might have seemed like it was going to be, an opportunity, but probably a bit of a battle too. I'm curious to know, has the state of play really improved in that 14 years since you started the business? And what kind of work do we still need to do to level this playing field, not just in advertising, but in so many workplaces across the planet?
Yeah, well, in advertising specifically, a survey was done last year with all of the agencies, and we've still got a great big bias and heavy representation of males. So that hasn't improved. And a staggering 42% of female employees across agencies report that they've experienced sexual harassment, 20% who've experienced it a couple of times. So there's that side of, let's call that an HR issue. But from a business perspective, this is a problem because we're not having enough access and women aren't being given enough opportunity to be able to bring their insights and wisdom to a world that is still very male lensed. And that's the concept of female lens thinking. Is not that you have to be a female to use a female lens. Male or female can use it. I mean, I plainly learned to use a male lens in order to succeed early in my career. But an attitude that allows for us to start thinking differently about the needs of men and the needs of women, not only as workforce, but as consumers. And that's where I see this really big opportunity.
That's fascinating. And obviously you've made a great living out of it. And I love this mantra that happy women equals a bigger basket and lifetime of loyalty. It sounds like there's a great economic reason why engaging women in the process is so key. Would you like to give us some examples of why it's good for the wider economy? Because sometimes I think when there's some financial incentive, if you like, it's more likely to happen because men and women will both buy into that.
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, if you think about Melinda Gates, she has said that we're sending our daughters into workplaces built for our fathers. So we are existing and we have received a history of this of business that has had men build it, and they've built it as best as they can. And yes, we have been creating and selling products for women since business has begun. But here is a moment, here is a disruption in the marketplace to say, we've received all of this wisdom, but how about we create some new wisdom around women's needs and wants and desires, because we've come so far as a society where more women are working, and they're working full-time or they're working part-time, and they're still juggling their household. So how can we better approach the products and the services that we're offering in order to better cater for a new and modern society where gender balance is, a hot topic and something that really can add value to the bottom line. Women are the biggest purchasers, and they're going to be worth 75% of the discretionary spend, or they'll be making those decisions in households within the next decade. So if women are responsible for driving those purchasing decisions, how can we better meet their needs?
Yeah, I think that's key. And I'm thinking of so many industries that's true. My background is in communications and public relations agencies. And I remember many years ago doing a campaign for, I reckon it's 15 years ago, Boral Bricks. So for our overseas listeners, it's one of the major brick house building companies in Australia and suppliers. And we worked out that we needed to put sample bricks in packs that women could carry home because they, at the end of the day, were making the decisions about what colour and style of bricks were going into new house builds. So, and that was a real change of thinking for this company that was very male, had a lot of blokey imagery, and all their communications reflected, oh, well, you know, men build houses. But really, they weren't making the decisions. So what you're saying has a lot of merit because I think that's a truth. And the more people embrace it, obviously it's going to be better for the bottom line as well.
And that's a great example. And I was going to say, you know, give me an example of one of your favourite brands, one that you absolutely love and that you're committed to and that you would never, ever choose anything other than that.
Yeah, are you asking me to do that? We're playing? Oh, wow, the questions are on me. This is so unusual. A brand that I totally love, I would have to say... Gosh, it's really hard when you put me on the spot with these categories. Okay, I'm going to say Adidas products, shoes, sports gear, all of it.
So if you had the choice of Nike or Reebok or any of the other big brands, you would still say, no, I love Adidas.
I would believe so. I can be swayed,
okay,
but yes, I would say so.
I would give that analogy then. If you could be swayed, then maybe you're more like you're dating that product, but something that you're absolutely married to. And I've got an example of Mecca as a cosmetic or a shop that I will only go to if I'm buying cosmetics. And Milo, I'm an absolute Milo fan. So, you know, since I was a kid, I've eaten it, and then I've got my kids onto the same thing. And I won't look at any other chocolate flavoured sprinkles for milk. It has to be Milo. So I say I'm married to it, and I'm a lifetime loyal customer. So I am of great value to them. But there are other brands that and other products that you have in your life. And I'd say, you know, if you think about products that you totally ignore, that you wouldn't even contemplate buying them. And for me, that's something like Samsung, because I'm an Apple person. So I'm just like, I married Apple, and that's my brand, and that's who I look at. So I actually ignore other brands. They don't even register on my radar. And then there are brands that you tolerate. And, you know, for me, they're supermarket brands, you know, whether it's Coles or Woolies or Aldi, I don't care, you know, it's sort of, I have to choose from those kinds of places, and that's where I go. I know so many ways they could improve my experience and my relationship with their brand. And there are also brands that you have a repertoire of, and I'd say that's a bit like flirting with those brands. You know, you'll go between, like for my kids' clothes, you know, Cotton On, Seed, Kmart, Witchery, you know, I'll sort of shop them all. But when a woman loves a brand, like I said with Milo or you with Adidas, you just don't go anywhere. So in terms of marketing and an effort to reach me and to meet my needs, I'm loyal. And I'm going to tell my friends that I love these brands, and I'm going to recommend that brand. But when you've decided you're just ignoring them or tolerating them, tolerating, I say, is a bit like the way Melania and Donald Trump live their relationship, you know.
We're assuming, but yes, all the evidence is in that realm, isn't it?
And then when you're dating them, it's like when Sophie chose Stu from The Bachelor. You know, she's chosen him and she's seeing, and she might marry him and make the dedication. But, you know, this concept that brands can be like the relationship that women have with people is a really good way of saying, well, where are we with women? You know, what do they love us? Do they flirt with us, or are they tolerating us? And if they're only tolerating us, what do we need to do in order to make ourselves more loved by them? You know, how do we move them up into that loyal relationship?
I know in your book, Blind Spots, How to Uncover and Attract the Fastest Emerging Economy, you do have a special methodology to help other businesses achieve those kind of results with the female spend, if you like. I know that you've said that it's all about being able to get businesses to get women or understand women. And then that means there's going to be better marketing spend. And those examples you've just shared really drive that home. I guess in some ways, is the so-called female dollar always going to impact a company's bottom line, or is it just a nice to have? I mean, how imperative is this realization from your perspective?
It'll be different for everyone's business, and that's the first step, is to say, well, if how much percent of the female market do you have, and what are they spending in categories? So let's say for new cars, women are buying and influencing 80% of new car purchases. And so if you are Volkswagen and you have only 40% of the female market, well, then you could see that you're actually missing out on a lot more potential market. So what would you need to do to make yourself better connected to a potential market? Understand who is spending the money and how can you deliver them more of what they want. And when you look at the money that you're missing out on by ignoring meeting their needs or understanding them or connecting with them, it might be that you have a great product but you're just not connecting with them properly with your communications. These are the things that increase your sales and increase, like I said, the loyalty, over a lifetime. And there's some really easy wins to be had. Other products perhaps are missing out on or products or brands are missing out on such a big part of their market that it takes a little more, understanding of what isn't the product delivering that women would want more. So it really is, it sounds like it's a difficult process, but the basics are, have you got as many women purchasing in your category? Have you got them purchasing your brand? And if not, let's start fixing it.
It's great. It makes sense. So simple. So simple. Just go and do it, everybody. I guess I'd like to change tack a little bit. The past year's been really focused on, they're saying, well, basically 2018 is the year of the woman, the unspoken year of the woman. But there's some really serious female-centric issues which have come to the fore in reaction perhaps to the rise of Trumpism and, if you like, backlashes in the wake of the Me Too campaign that launched across Hollywood in 2017 and spilled over into the mainstream. What kind of lasting impact do you think this is really going to have on equality for women in all walks of life? And I guess that gender divide between men and women, is this just going to be something that goes away and everything goes back to normal once, the media dies down? Or do you think this has a catalyst for something bigger that benefits both men and women?
I think it's here to stay. You can't put the genie back in the bottle. And we are in an age of disruption, and that's normally we think of disruption as being around digital and technology and, artificial intelligence and the onslaught of driverless cars. But gender is proving to be a massive disruption, and the Me Too campaign is a good case in point for that, because women are starting to see that across the globe, being invisible isn't okay anymore. And having faced mistreatment or even, it doesn't have to be harassment or misogyny. It just might be a male bias or a gender bias. Women aren't going to take it quietly anymore, whether it's in the workplace, the marketplace, or in the home. Men are actually being held accountable now, and women are starting to realise the power of their voice. But the nice link I like to make from there is it's not just our voice that's powerful. When you think about that figure that you mentioned in the introduction, 28 trillion of the global consumer economy, and that by 2028, we will be making 75% of decisions of the discretionary spend in our home. Women actually have such power in their wealth. And if we as an aggregate decided to make our decision or to move our decisions and our dollars away from companies that aren't supporting women, that aren't seeing it the way women need and demand and want greater support and more choice and products that deliver to them. If women all acted together, and let's say they stop buying cars from companies where there are no women in upper management, or let's say we all moved our money to banks that were pro-female and had gender equal boards, I think they would pretty quickly realise they need to answer the call of gender discrimination. So
oh, totally. I can see the argument. It makes so much sense. I guess it's that thing of, I hope it all spills into what you're talking about and it doesn't just become, a bit of a phenomenon which in a year's time we've all fatigued of, and, things go back to what we
and
don't
I see
want.
why there is fatigue, because gender is it's a hot topic and it's a hot potato, because there's a lot of confusion between what harassment is versus what flirting is. There's confusion around, does gender mean we have to have an equal workforce, or does gender mean that it's about seeing things in a gender balanced way through both male and female lens and being able to cater the right way to our end user or to our consumer? And there's a lot of businesses that are popping up now that are working in this space, and one of them is Fem Economy. I'm not sure if you've heard of them, but there you go.
Indeed.
There's a website, and they are signing up brands who want to announce to the rest of the world that, yes, we've got gender balanced teams, we've got gender fair workplaces, and so this is giving women and men a choice that if you want to support companies that are pro gender balance, then shop a Fem Economy approved brand. And I think this is the start of something pretty big, sustaining the change that is much needed in order to have, a better economy for everyone.
Absolutely. One of my former podcast guests is Dr. Michael Kimmel. He actually calls himself the world's most prominent male feminist. He actually has a very famous quote saying that privilege is largely invisible to those who have it, which I think we all agree with. And that's whether you're, a powerful white man, if you like, who's, had a lot of, if you like, inherent benefits of just being who you are. There are other examples of that as well. But I guess my question to you is, how important is it to have meaningful discussions with men to change these attitudes as well? Because I love working with men. A lot of my clients are men, and I have to admit, I don't feel sorry for them, but I do feel like it's going to be a loss if we don't take them on this journey with us. So I would be curious to know about your thoughts on engaging leaders who predominantly are men on this journey as well, so that they can support it and we can get a mutually beneficial outcome.
I completely agree that this is something that we have to work side by side to change. It's not going to happen unless men are part of the movement. And if you think of a ladder, imagine a ladder, and on the bottom rung is people who don't think this way, people who aren't interested in gender. It's just not on their radar, or they're not interested in it. They're comfortable, as you said, Dr. Kimmel said, that, their privilege is invisible, so it just doesn't register for them. And I'd call them a late adopter. And then go up a few rungs of the ladder to the top, and you'll see people who are absolutely, they are outthinking their competition, because they've realised that if they are only serving half of the population, then they're going to be missing out on a lot of, and it's not just half the profit. If women are responsible for, up to 75% of spend, they are missing out on a really big opportunity to connect with the people, and that they are the early adopters of this. So I love working with the men who are enlightened, who are woke, who are ready to have these discussions and say, right, let's put about fixing this and making the most of the opportunity that is awaiting us. But there's a lot of people in between as well, everything from companies that are group thinking and really not taking any notice of it, to those who are rethinking. And often I go into a business when they're rethinking their attitudes towards gender and possibly rethinking why are they number 3 or number 4 in the category when, what is number 1 doing that is so much better? And, working with people who are ready to have their blind spots illuminated is such a satisfying experience. And I've learned recently that if the leaders don't see it, I'm not going to be able to convince them, They're the late adopters, and there's no changing their minds right now.
Absolutely. I always ask my questions to my guests 2 final questions, and I'd love to get your feedback on these. Do you have any special mentors or inspirational people that have guided you? And if so, who are they, and what have they taught you about life? I have
had so many of them, so I probably can't name them.
You'll have to just pick one major one, and I guess what the takeout would be.
My belief is that, the student appears when the teacher appears when the student is ready. So, throughout my time I've had lots, and I kind of curate a lot of people. But look, globally, people that I watch and admire sort of, in a space of spirituality in life. I love Danielle Laporte and Glennon Doyle and Tammy Simon. I think, they help me ground myself so that I can be a better business person and a better mother and a better wife. And, it really for me is about curating the best from people who are doing amazing work and having a look at how it works for me.
Absolutely. Final question. Last advice. What would be your best tip to anyone else who wants to succeed in the politics of gender?
I think gender is showing us the subject, the awakening that we have. It's showing us that it can really impact the world and how we have relationships and how we do business and how our society operates, and that gender shouldn't be something that people shy away from and think it's too hard, and it is that political hot potato, and it's going to throw up all of these different emotions from people who are experienced gender in a different way. I think it can actually be the difference. I think the difference in men and women should be celebrated and loved and should be seen as a way to create new opportunities, which ultimately, if you can reimagine your business from ground zero through a female lens, reimagine it through a male lens, and work out how can we best serve our society, what changes can we make, and how do we make equal and better changes that accommodate everyone and that are good for everyone. And there's nothing to be frightened of from segmenting your market into male and female. It's not a discrimination issue. It's actually an opportunity.
I love your positivity, and it's made me a lot more hopeful for the future. If you do want to connect further with Bec, I'll have some details on my show notes. Until next time, keep well. Thanks for listening today. If you've enjoyed the politics of everything, we thrive on feedback. So please add a short review and share the podcast with your network, your friends and family. I'm also always on the hunt for fabulous new guests. So if you've got a view to share and an idea how to get our listeners excited, please email me at amber@bespokecomms, that's BESPOKECOMMS.com.au, and we'll be sure to get back to you. Until next time.